All right, today we're diving into a real puzzle, one that comes to us from the Labari Journal. It's about Ghana, and it boils down to this. What happens when a country's official rulebook says it's secular, but its people are overwhelmingly religious? You can probably guess this creates some serious tension between faith and the state, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
So let's just get right to the heart of it. The big question is Ghana turning into a soft theocracy? Now, that's a really loaded term. It basically means a country that isn't officially run by religious law, but where religious leaders have so much sway, so much influence, that they're effectively shaping politics from behind the scenes. We're going to look at the arguments for and against that idea.
To really get what's at stake here, you need to start with just one number: 95%. That's how many people in Ghana identify with a major faith. I mean, think about that. This isn't just some dry statistic, it is the absolute bedrock of the country's culture and society, and it's the key to understanding everything else we're about to get into. Okay, so with that in mind, the first place we have to look is the country's official rulebook. And, right off the bat, we run into this thing the source calls Ghana's secular paradox. Check this out. The very first words of Ghana's 1992 constitution are, "In the name of Almighty God." Now, this isn't just some flowery, ceremonial phrase. It literally bakes a religious idea right into the foundation of the entire country's legal system.
But then you flip a few pages later, and the Constitution seems to do a complete 180. Article 56 couldn't be clearer. The government is forbidden from creating a state religion or forcing any kind of religious program on its citizens. So you've got this officially secular state that was founded in the name of God. And that is the central tension we're digging into.
So you might be wondering, how does a paradox like that actually play out in the real world? Well, it's led to this really unique, kind of hybrid model, something the source material actually calls religio-secularism. For a long, long time, sociologists like Jose Casanova talked about something called secularization theory. The basic idea was pretty simple. As a country modernizes, gets more educated, more technologically advanced, religion just naturally fades from the public square. It becomes a more private, personal thing. But here's the thing. In Ghana, that classic theory is being turned completely on its head. Instead of religion taking a back seat, it's actually stepping more and more into the spotlight. And this chart here really lays it all out. While the old theory predicted religion's role would shrink, what we're seeing in Ghana is what some are calling desecularization. Religion isn't just holding its ground, it's doing a U-turn, expanding its role in public life and gaining a ton of political influence. So who's behind this shift? Well, the source points a finger directly at the super powerful and really well-organized Pentecostal-Charismatic movement. We're talking about huge personalities, incredibly influential pastors like Archbishop Duncan Williams, and major groups like the Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Council. These guys have become massive voices in the national conversation. And that brings us to maybe the most fascinating part of this whole story: the very direct, very public relationship between the nation's top political leaders and these powerful church figures. Now, this link isn't brand new, but as you can see from this timeline, the whole thing has really sped up. Especially after 2001, the influence of these major Christian leaders on Ghana's presidents just skyrocketed. And this trend was on full display during the presidency of John Dramani Mahama, himself a devout Christian, who was elected back in 2012. And it's not just that they're meeting. Listen to the words they use. A guy like Archbishop Duncan Williams isn't just called an advisor. He's described as a spiritual pillar for the president. I mean, that suggests a relationship that goes way, way beyond your typical political chit-chat. And this isn't some secret backroom deal either. President Mahama was very public about it. He actually pledged to make the ties between his government and the church even stronger, specifically to get their guidance and wisdom in governance. So when you put all these pieces together, what you get is the core of a very real, very active debate that's happening right now about the future identity of Ghana. And there are two totally different ways of looking at all this. On one side, you have the government's view, which frames this as simply seeking wisdom for the good of the nation. But on the other side, you've got critics who see these exact same actions as a huge threat. They argue it's chipping away at the separation of church and state, and, well, opening the door to that soft theocracy. They're worried that major policies could end up being shaped by religious beliefs instead of secular law, which could push away citizens who don't belong to the dominant faith. Which, of course, brings us all the way back to our starting point. Is Ghana a soft theocracy? The truth is, the source material doesn't give us a simple yes or no.
What it does is lay out all this powerful evidence for what is clearly a huge political and cultural shift that's still in progress. The final answer, really, is still being written on the ground in Ghana.
And that really leaves us with one last, much bigger question that honestly applies to a lot more places than just Ghana. When a nation's faith and its government start to weave together like this, where exactly do you draw the line? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide where that line is drawn?